Good evening to everybody listening. Welcome to Rose City Politics. It is February 24th, 2021. Shout out to my dad, Jon Lidke. It's his birthday. I'm able to do that. I'm the host. I get to pull that kind of thing off. So our regular panel tonight includes Doug Sartori, who is coming to us live from
the Roseland Golf Course Clubhouse.
That's what I figured. I like that that's where you decided to go with it. You didn't comment in our pre-show banter. I've got the renderings of the new Roseland Clubhouse right behind me here, and it looks wonderful. I can't wait to check it out once we get to build out on it. We have Don Merrifield here as well. How are you, Don?
I'm very good. But yeah, that clubhouse looks like it needs updating. We should spend some money on that.
They still have the Christmas decorations.
I know, it's crazy.
We also have a special guest tonight. Sarah Mushtaq is here, a Windsor community member who writes for the Windsor Star as a guest columnist. She writes as a millennial about race, gender, and life in today's changing world and the city of Windsor. And her most recent column is soon to be released, and it is about our topic tonight that we're discussing, the 2021 City of Windsor budget. So strap in. We've got a show that we're going to get to. But first, Sarah, how are you tonight?
I'm well. Happy birthday to Mr. Lidke Sr., I guess I should say. So happy birthday to him.
I will pass that on because he does not listen to the show. So I'll make sure that he gets that direct. No, I'm just kidding. How have you been doing? Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Excited to talk about golf courses today.
Are you a big golfer, Sarah?
You know, I do it all the time.
I figured
even
as
in
much.
Windsor.
Yeah, I figured as much.
We're going to get into all of the, dips and dives and sand traps that this City of Windsor budget is showing us. That was the best that I could do at a golf reference. Hey, listen, our generation, millennials, aren't golfing, and it's not about to turn around. So you guys got to figure out how to get us in, and I don't think it's going to be new clubhouses.
Clubhouse.
New clubhouse. Well,
I think the big promise is that the curlers are going to now be segregated into their own facilities, so you won't have to mix with curlers when you're in the golf course clubhouse. That's a big win for everybody.
So we're bringing segregation back in Black History Month.
I did not even know how to respond to that, Sarah.
It's
I'm glad that
only
you took it
curlers. Nobody cares about curlers, Sarah. You can still discriminate against one group. It's curlers.
Curling is a voluntary activity. You choose to be a curler.
It's not a protected
That's
class.
a good response. That's a good response.
If you're listening tonight and you're a Patreon subscriber, thank you. It helps make this type of banter possible. If not, I don't know why you wouldn't want to be contributing. Head over to patreon.com/Rose City Politics and, give us some cash. We'd really appreciate it. Also, be sure to check us out in BizX Magazine. It is a new monthly column that we are writing about Windsor issues, and we're featured in print, online. You should read our column, and you should read other columns as well. Head over to bizxmagazine.com and take a look at what we have written down. As well, follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, all of your podcasting apps. We're everywhere, so follow us. And of course, thank you so much to Leuna625, Building Better Communities, for making this show that we do live on tape possible week after week. Really fun show tonight that we will be getting to right now. We're going to be talking about the City of Windsor budget coming in with a tax freeze and $10.5 million of extra spending. We're also going to be talking about the potential closure of a migrant farm worker isolation hotel because of a potential funding shortfall. And if we have time, we are going to be revving our motors and getting as quickly as possible to a story about a drag strip in Windsor. And that's about as best as I could do trying to link that to the topic itself. So without any further ado, let's talk about a budget, because it's just going to keep being like wheels spinning if I keep going on like this. I'm glad I can't see Sarah's face right now. It's just the two of you, and it's just disapproving nods, which makes me feel like I've really No, okay, let's just get into this. City of Windsor budget. There is a tax freeze and $10.5 million in extra spending. Thanks to the Windsor Star's Brian Cross for putting together our rough look into this. The 2021 budget was unanimously approved. It locked in that tax rate, but it found an extra $10.5 million for spending on city departments, agencies, boards, and committees, and infrastructure. Budget day ran for 13 hours with deliberations, numerous delegates, and it saw $875 million approved in its operating budget, with $427 million coming from taxpayers. The tax freeze was achieved thanks to the reduction in the education levy from the province at $10.5 million this year. We have spoken about that already. Those savings helped fund city operations with $2.6 million. ABCs, the agencies, boards, and committees at $3 million, and the asset management plan at $5 million. Without that education levy reduction, council was told that the approved budget would have meant a 2.48% tax increase. Now, this budget saw investments in affordable housing, transit, $170 million in capital projects. $1 million was put towards the Windsor Works economic diversification strategy, and there was even talk of a 1 kilometer urban environment park, which we will be finding out about a bit more in coming days, as that was discussed behind closed doors. Council also pre-approved an extended patio season from April 1st to November 15th, waiving patio and parklet fees. Now, council did approve roughly $70,000 to permanently fund a street outreach worker. However, it did not opt to hire a second, nor did council approve any investment towards the climate change emergency that was declared in 2019. As we've discussed over the past couple of weeks, there is still $38 million in a forecasted deficit due to lost revenues and additional expenses due to COVID-19. And the city and administration is obviously hoping that the federal government will pick up the tab for that, like they did last year when there was a $56 million COVID deficit. There was also, as I said, $170 million spent towards the $1.6 billion 10-year capital budget, capital plan. And we are seeing this year multiple reconstructions, improvements, and repairs. But of course, as mentioned, $4.3 million towards the new clubhouse at Roseland, $4.2 million for the Peace Fountain, $3.4 million for a new road at the WFCU Center in Lausanne, and $3 million to continue work on Banwell. We also saw Transit Windsor seeing a 5% budget increase approved, as well as a new line, Route 18. We're going to talk about the new route and Transit Windsor in a bit. But right now, Sarah, we've got you here. You've written about this. I want to get to you first. What do we like about this budget? What did you take away from it and go, this was good? Or did you walk away from it and go overall?
Yeah, I think it was more of the latter. It's, I want to preface this, and I feel like it should go without saying that it's a pandemic. Of course, things are hard. A lot of people are struggling. But I don't think that is an excuse for political leadership to take a pass on the budget or use it as an excuse to not be forward thinking or visionary. I know you guys have talked about that on the podcast a few times as well. So, I mean, if you took out the pandemic parts or excuses in this budget, it could have been a budget from any other year, really. It's, we keep talking about we have an issue with this and we have an issue with that. We've got an issue with transit. We've got an issue with youth retention. We've got an issue with, affordable housing. Yet every year it's not really addressed in an adequate manner in the budget. So I think at some point, we have to stop accepting these excuses from political leadership and hold them to task for it. Whether or not we get to the point where enough of the public puts that pressure on them, I don't know if that's going to happen, especially in the middle of a pandemic, like I mentioned, when people are really struggling. But yeah, I think it was just meh, and it really, we could do much better, and it's unfortunate that we don't. I see Don just laughing at this.
I have to agree with you on the point that we were told that this is a pandemic budget, that our priorities have to be shifted and skewed because we've seen, so much belt tightening or whatever euphemisms that we want to use. And they're always the same excuses that are trotted out. But this time right now, we're talking about it in the context of a pandemic. Yet we're seeing $10.5 million unexpectedly spent. So it's hard to, balance that off if it is a pandemic. Well, how do we find extra money that we can put towards things that weren't already recommended? And then beyond that, again, you look at priorities, $4.3 million for a clubhouse. I mean, that's close to $15 million right there that could have been used to address some of the very serious things that we discuss on a regular basis on this show, that you write about on a regular basis in your column, that I think a lot of people in this city have honestly quite an appetite to see delivered to them. We've spoken, Doug spoke last time on the show about how if there was a potential tax increase that brought with it a fully functioning transit system, he might be able to shift spending in his own household. So it's all about those priorities and what we deliver directly to citizens and how we address it. But Doug, I've said your name, so I'm going to bring you in because it wouldn't be fair to bring you up and not give you that response.
Thanks, John. I really appreciated Sarah's comments. I think this is a pretty dull budget in general, and probably by design. This is very much a stay the course budget. There are some, what many of us on this panel think of as priorities for our community, issues that are of critical importance that haven't been funded or haven't been funded adequately. But that's not really a change from other years. This is very much a budget that, besides the impact of COVID-19, you would not see out of place in 2016, 2017, 2018. The big thing here is that when basically faced with a $10+ million windfall from the province, the choice that council made was to hold the line on taxes and freeze taxes. And I heard Councillor Bordelland's remarks about the impact of COVID on small business and a reason why this might be a year to hold the line on taxes. And I understand that sentiment, and I think that's fair enough. But when you have an opportunity to make an inflationary increase, an increase only at the rate of inflation to the taxes that people are going to pay, and put an additional $10 million of spending into priority areas, that is an opportunity that maybe should have been considered a little bit more seriously. And finally, I want to give Don a chance to tell me how wrong I am about all of this stuff. But finally, something that we often talk about in terms of budgets is that budgets are about priorities. And this is very much a budget that tells you exactly what the priorities of city government are. And the city government chose to prioritize the Roseland Golf Course clubhouse renovation rather than prioritizing a new transit route for students, rather than prioritizing an additional outreach worker for the homeless, rather than prioritizing adaptation and education on climate change. All of those items added together are 25% of what is being spent on the revitalization of Roseland Golf Course Clubhouse. Those are political priorities. I know we're going to talk later about the budget meeting itself. Something that has become a common refrain from Mayor Dilkens is to call anything that sounds like criticism of him or anything that sounds like criticism of the priorities of city administration as political, and to identify that as political and basically try to rule it out of order because it is just people playing politics. And I'm struck by how political investing in Roseland Golf Course is in the year before a municipal election. That is 100% political. To me, that is what the priority that I see in terms of this budget. Yes, there are many good things that the city has chosen to fund, not the least of which I think is the Windsor Work Strategy, which we've talked about the flaws, we've talked about the challenges with the report. But I think it's really important that the city is choosing to prioritize that. There are some really good things in this budget, but at the end of the day, what trumps it all for me is how heavy the footprint of politics is on the budget.
Well, I'll take my opportunity to tell Doug he's wrong. And why I was smiling when Sarah was talking, she kind of said that they used COVID as an excuse this time. But seriously, have there ever been a budget where you thought, hey, they finally nailed one there? Now it's going forward. So yeah, this is just another year, another day. Going back to what Jon said in the intro, he right there found 14 and almost $15 million in stuff that we could say is really, in my opinion, and I'm sure it's probably shared amongst all of you, is not priority spending. So to say we have to raise taxes in order to fund these things, I don't think that's true. I think we just have to decide what our priorities are and make choices. I mean, we talked about last week about the Roseland situation. I mean, that's ridiculous. I heard Councillor Francis on the radio this morning discussing that, they actually want to tear it down and build a whole new clubhouse. And his rationale for it was built in the 1970s and it's not very energy efficient. So obviously they've already fixed climate change just by changing the clubhouse. So that's going to sort itself out. And, we talked about last week about the $200,000 initiative for racism. I forget what they call it, but that's a 1-year funding thing. So if we can solve climate crisis in 1 year with a few $100,000, I'm sure racism will be solved next year. So I think we're really nailing it this year and we're doing a great job.
I will say that was the thing in the budget that I felt was the most insulting. I mean,
well, for
it's just
$200,000, don't even do it. Like it's insulting.
I agree
at
with
that
that.
point. Yeah.
It's just, like you said, this budget's obviously political. At the end of the day, it is the job of, our political leaders to do these things like sewers and roads and all of that fun stuff, reconstruction. That's their job. Like this is what they're supposed to do. It's not like we don't need to pat you on the back for doing the bare minimum. The question here becomes like, who is this serving? And are the most marginalized in our community able to access the resources and services that they need? Like with the last year, we had all this conversation about Black Lives Matter and racism in the community, and to turn around from that almost a year later, like we're about 9 months from when that happened, racism hasn't gone anywhere. Like there was just another report today of a woman attacked in Alberta, which is now the 6th woman attacked since December. And I mean, yeah, it's Alberta, but this stuff happens here too. And so to say that we're just going to throw $200,000 at this is just insulting. And it's not, all of these other things are nice to have too. Like I'm not saying a golf course renovation shouldn't happen, but it shouldn't happen when there's people still waiting for, taking 2 hours for a bus ride or still waiting for affordable housing. It just shows who our priorities are. And that's really unfortunate that it comes down to that at the end of the day.
Well, and the problem is in that 2 hours, you could have got 9 holes in. I mean, if you just focused your time on what's important.
Why would you go spend 2 hours on the bus trying to get an education when you could have just gone to a golf course? I like that analogy.
Maybe some curling afterwards. It'd be nice for everyone.
If you're in Forest Glade, Don, it's going to take you 2 hours on the bus before you can play those 9 holes, though.
Well, I figured
Also
their mom
valid.
would drive them there. But.
And it's interesting as well, that anti-racism initiative, again, that $200,000 that was approved would fall entirely under the direction of the mayor's office. So again, it's $200,000, but it is a highly politicized $200,
Yes.
$200,000. To say $200, it almost feels like that's the same there. Freudian slip that fell through. So I guess what would you have rather seen, Sarah? I mean, it's easy for us to talk about what's there, but let's talk about what's not there and that you wanted.
Yeah, this is a little bit of a spoiler, I guess, teaser for my column, but with the anti-racism.
See, this is what we wanted Fraser to do last week, but he posted his column first and then advertised it, that guy. So thank you for
that goes one way too. And shout out to Fraser too. Fraser and Mita, they had some really good posts before the budget, and they're always have some great insights. But the anti-racism initiative, one of the things that I sometimes often find frustrating is we act like solutions don't exist unless they're made in Windsor. And there's a lot of solutions happening throughout the province, the country, the world that we could adapt to Windsor fairly easily. So for example, the anti-racism initiative, other cities are working on this stuff. The city of Toronto has like an anti-Black racism unit dedicated with a 5-year plan. Each year has priorities that they're working on. It's laid out. The community partners are laid out. It's just very clear what they're doing and what they're working towards. And then there's a report every year, going over what they've done. So this work is possible. We just need to do it. And then I think even on the other hand, this is a slight tangent from the budget a little bit, but when we're talking about racism and anti-racism initiatives, the City of Windsor has a diversity officer. The City of Windsor has a diversity committee, but I would argue those resources are very underutilized. In 2019, the City of Windsor was talking about how, a significant portion of their workforce was retiring over the next years and next 10 years, next decade or so. So it's been a couple years since then. And it's like, what have we done since then to ensure that the pipeline feeding in talent into the City of Windsor to diversify the workforce so that it better reflects the city and therefore, services that the city provides would be more equitable potentially. What are we doing to make sure that the workforce will look like that? And it's like a whole lot of quiet, a whole lot of nothing. It's really difficult. And I think the conversation over the last few months shows that when you have, either a committee with no teeth or a person in a position like a diversity officer without any resources or supports, whether it's through staff or actual financial powers or the ability to change policies in a significant way, they're just there on paper and it's not actually changing anything. So, if we're talking about the budget, like, why not, instead of that $200,000, support a unit like what Toronto did, or give more funding or resources to the committees that and the diversity officer that's already available so that they can do the work and implement it. Like, there's very simple solutions where you can make $200,000 go a long way. But I think one of the comments there, I'm just going to quote it, was that that $200,000 was dedicated to, sorry, just going to find it here, that would support projects that would help eliminate all forms of racism, including systemic and systematic racism. And I'm like, just reading that is like, $200,000 is not going to solve this with a one-time funding over the next 10 years. And so it just shows
not with that kind of attitude, Sarah. Come on, be positive.
Clearly I'm a Debbie Downer right now, but it's like, if we want to make a difference, like the tools, the resources, the research, everything is there. We just have to use it and implement it. And I think that's sometimes what's frustrating, because like you mentioned, like this money just seems political to give to groups that are, just going to say yes man to the mayor and not necessarily push back on things that need to be improved. Sorry, that's my soapbox with some of these diversity and racism issues, where it's like, we could do so much better, yet we don't.
I'm really glad that you went on that rant, Sarah. I think there's a lot to pick up on there. The key thing I think that is a thread through everything that you talked about is vision. With vision and the ability to pursue a goal relentlessly, we can accomplish a lot within a municipal budget. I think one of the major problems that we have as a community is that we lack vision at the top. And there isn't that sustained, intense effort to focus on problems that exist in this community. And instead, what we get are Band-Aids. A Band-Aid gets thrown on it when there's a bad news cycle or a few bad news cycles in a row. A Band-Aid gets thrown on it, some money gets thrown at it so that it will go away for a while and that you can neutralize that negative story. That's not the same thing as having and articulating a vision for our community that lifts everybody up. And it's totally possible. You don't have to raise taxes to insane levels. You don't have to do those things in order to solve the problems facing our community. And that's what I find so incredibly frustrating about the situation we find ourselves in. And I thought it was really illuminating that you mentioned the $200,000 for the anti-racism initiative is flowing into the mayor's office. I never thought that I would say this, but by comparison to our current mayor, Eddie Francis was a decentralizer. I cannot believe how many threads and how much control has to run through our mayor's office. And I think ultimately the reason for that is negative. It's not because there's a strong vision coming out of the mayor's office that he wants to implement. I think it's entirely defensive. If you want to guarantee that your anti-racism initiative is not going to embarrass the mayor, run it through the mayor's office. If you want to make sure that your economic diversification initiative is not going to embarrass the mayor, run it through the mayor's office. I don't think that avoiding embarrassment for Mr. Dilkens is a good reason to structure our municipal government one way or another, but he seems to think so.
You know, if I can jump in, like he's already shown this is not his area of expertise. And I think as an aside, before I make my point here, that, you know, as an effective leader, no matter where you are, you're not the expert in every area, right? Like that's why you put together a strong team that can feed you the information that you need to make, you know, the right decisions. You know, I think it was a couple weeks ago, or I don't know what time is anymore. So in the past, recent past, at the police board meeting, the mayor made a comment. They were looking at, there was someone who wanted to be able to use the Windsor Police logo, and he also made materials that included the Punisher logo, which is the Marvel vigilante crime fighter character, and then the Blue Lives Matter logo, both of which are problematic. And he was actually sincerely shocked that the Blue Lives Matter logo was problematic. So, you know, like saying you've consulted with the community, or like, you know, you've done the readings, maybe not even really, it just shows that when push comes to shove, like he's not the most effective person to put together an effective anti-racism strategy. So it just, you know, I would much rather say, like, you know, someone in his position to say, I don't know, this is not my area of expertise, but I am pulling together a team that does know and who's going to tell me what we need to do on a municipal level to make the city a better place, not only for people from different, you know, backgrounds, but also people who may be marginalized. So that's not there, and I don't think that's going to come.
I'm really glad that you brought up the Punisher logo and the Blue Lives Matter logo, and just Mayor Dilkens' just utter confusion at why these could be an issue. This is the same mayor who posed with our former police chief with the leader of a white supremacist group for a photograph while he was wearing his patches and a full vest. You know, it's ignorance at the end of the day. And I don't know if ignorance is what you want to see when it comes to such serious issues, but even putting that aside, you know, just be a little humble. You are clearly proven to have a pretty bad track record at these things. No offense whatsoever. You might think that you're great, but put aside that ego. Ego is always going to be the biggest problem when it comes to leadership in any organization as well. And we've got an ego problem here. And going back to what Doug was saying, with that 200,000 being used, I guess, to try to insulate the mayor from criticism, the notes that I was taking just before you had started talking, Doug, was, you know, if you focus on a problem, or I guess rather to have a vision, you're kind of creating an expectation that you're supposed to deliver on that. And that goes to what you were saying, I guess, that embarrassing aspect of not following through. So it's just easier not to do it. It's easier not to do anything. It's a lot easier to treat it as a PR and a marketing initiative, and sprinkle some money here and make sure that you get the right media coverage there. And while at the end of the day, that might be enough to get you reelected or help to position you on a track to another level of government, it's not going to do anything to really improve our community whatsoever. And I think arguably could make things worse. It could make our community a less appealing community, because we're clearly not trying to address these issues that we love to talk about so very much, but that we don't actually want to do anything about. Don, I know that you've been wanting to get in.
Well, I was just going to say, you know, kind of on Doug's message about him wanting to control the narrative on all this. that's the reality of it. And whether it's the racism thing or it's, economic diversification or the same thing we bang our head against the wall every week and we hear about, look at it this way. Let's say we can't just say let's say the mayor and council finally decided, yeah, let's go a different route. Let's not do the made in Windsor non-solutions that we always come up with, and look at other cities and look what they're doing and fund these groups so they're already doing this kind of work. If they're successful, what does it politically, what does it look like back on our mayor who's been trying to control this for years? It looks like he failed miserably, and with what feeble little resources there are other groups that could actually make a difference that he couldn't do. So, once you go down that path from a political standpoint, and whether it's the mayor or council or whoever it is, it's hard to pull back because you're putting yourself in a risky political situation of actually making yourself look incompetent because somebody else was able to do the job that you weren't able to do.
I don't know. I think he could take the dub, Don. I think that he could actually take the win.
That would be a mulligan, John. You want to say mulligan?
Hey, our generation uses dub for W.
It's golf. We're talking golf, man. Take the mulligan.
But I think that he could take the win on it if he were willing to, be collaborative, to sort of step back and not to shift focus too much. But look at COVID. We said this at the outset. If you want to be a good leader during COVID, just defer to public health. Let them set the direction. And then when screw ups happen, you can just say, hey, it wasn't me. I did what the people who were hired to solve this issue said to do. And when we look to political leaders that are going through some of the roughest spots right now for dealing with COVID, they're the ones who decided to take it solely on themselves or try to do things themselves and push away those outside experts who could have provided some help. But let's shift focus right now to Transit Windsor, because we saw the approval of a 4-month pilot project to run a new East End to St. Clair College bus line. This is Route 18. It's going to be starting at the beginning of September, tuned in for classes at the main campus of St. Clair College. Now, this agreement saw the college pitching in half of the $180,000 to run the pilot, which to even just say out loud is just ridiculous that we had to go asking the college for $90,000 to fund the key component of our transit master plan. Now sorry, Sarah, I'll let you jump in right there.
I'm sorry. It's just again, that $200,000 I will keep coming back to, because take part of that and put it towards transit, because a reliable, safe, effective transit would benefit so many people, including many marginalized communities, right? But again, it's who do we value? And then just based on the last conversation as well, I just want to make a point about the consultants that we're paying so much to tell us what we already know. If you want to use that money, hire anti-racism consultants maybe who are well versed in this and can tell us what municipal policies and investments we need to make this city a safer and more inclusive place for everyone, of which one is often transit, safe transit that's active transit, buses, bike lanes, all of that fun stuff. So it's just so frustrating that just to get partial funding we had to go through so much pain and deliberation, and it had to be almost an argument, and people had to make the case for it that in a city where we complain about driving more than 15 minutes to get somewhere, we're willing to let people sit on a bus for 2 hours, right? That should be embarrassing, and we should kind of feel ashamed about ourselves for that.
I really think you're underestimating the amount of consulting and great advice you can get from a golf pro, Sarah. If you go down there and you're lining up your shot, the guy's full, he's been doing this for years. He's full of great advice. He knows a lot of people. It's a great system.
It's more about the networking than it is about actually playing the game, right, Don?
I'm in real estate. That's golf is a big networking thing, but I'll cut back on the golf jokes. You guys go on.
I know. I mean, I'm enjoying them because that was one of the lessons in our MBA, to go golfing. I'm we paid money to learn this, apparently. So
I would have told you to do that for $5,000.
Much more cost effective. I like it.
I'm saving you money already.
So I'm going to bleed a little bit into talking about the council meeting now. if you watched the debate around the this deal with St. Clair College, there was a lot of energy and time and effort spent by certain faces around the council table to congratulate the mayor and Fred Francis for striking this amazing deal with the college. Um, I think that there's maybe a little bit more rational narrative here. What happened is, in my opinion, um, not funding this route this year was a gigantic blunder. It was a gigantic blunder that you can only say it originates from the mayor's office. Obviously, this budget was crafted in the mayor's office since the media saw it before councillors did. So the only person who I can say is to blame for this blunder in the budget of overlooking a critically important new transit route to finally serve students on the East End to get to the college that they attend in a reasonable amount of time. What had to happen, if you look at what happened here and kind of read between the lines, what had to happen is that Patty France had to pick up the phone and say, guys, what is it going to take to get this done, and hammer out a deal and put money on the table. St. Clair College had to put money on the table so that the City of Windsor would fund an essential city service adequately to serve the students of the college. That is a huge error. So the mayor and his supporters can pat themselves on the back and congratulate themselves about this amazing, wonderful deal that was struck. But if this was if this was a deal that was to be made, why did it take till the weekend before the budget vote for this deal to get made? It's not because of the amazing foresight and vision coming out of the mayor's office, that's for sure.
Well, and it sees St. Clair College students essentially being like paying twice for this. They have to fund the line, then they're going to have to go fund, their own trips on the line. And then they're being looked towards to as a complete subsidizing of the entire line because they want to set up a U pass or like a St. Clair College pass. And this goes back to what Councillor Bordelin, we talked about last week, was tweeting about. We have no problem here just putting expense on top of those who quite honestly can't afford to have these continual expenses. Whereas if we just decided to get our act together and, fund our services appropriately and have a meaningful, a tax increase or not spending money on projects that aren't quite frankly essential or aren't that are essential that we want to put our money towards, we wouldn't have to see the same situation repeating itself. Don, let me bring your voice in on this though.
Well, I think look, I can understand, when the whole discussion around transit came up, even pre-budget, we mentioned this on the show a little bit last week. Look, I understand the mayor and the people who think like him down there that, ridership is down, what do you say, 85% or something like that. So I understand, throwing a bunch of new money at transit in a time when nobody's using it, for lack of a better term, or a very small fraction of the population. I understand that, but this specific situation with the college, I mean, this shouldn't be coming up in a pandemic time. This should have been taken care of years ago. This is simple. And I'm not going to lie, when I heard the whole debate and I saw the whole thing, and I thought, well, there's probably this much, people are not watching. I held my finger up like this. There's, I can almost understand it, but we're talking $200,000. I mean, we blow $200,000, on the most ridiculous things every year. So something as important to this, to probably a pretty large population of our younger people who need to get to the college, this should be a no-brainer. This shouldn't even been a discussion. And you're right, the fact that the college had to chip in, I don't know if that was kind of pre-planned to make it look like, we saved this at the last minute and everybody gets to, get their picture in the paper and look like they've done a great job. But I mean, this is, going back to what Sarah and what we've talked about many times before, it's all about priorities, and we don't have any priorities in the city. It's like every year we wake up from a coma and start from new and go, oh, what are we going to do this year? Like last year didn't happen. It's always a one-off situation where there's no, okay, the $200,000 for the anti-racism initiative, fine, do that, but do that every year and make it, maybe have it go up 5% a year. Do something that is going forward. Just throw one time, like even the transit line, it's a test program from September to December. What happens next January? we're going to be having the same fight, and we're going to be having these same conversations. And I wouldn't be surprised if somehow that line gets cut.
Oh, if the students don't vote to subsidize it entirely, yeah, of course. Doug, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
Well, just Don, how can you say that we don't have priorities in this town? Obviously, polished brass beer taps at Roseland Golf Course Country Club are a priority.
Well, Doug,
okay?
I wasn't talking about the important stuff. I was just mentioning some of the frivolous things we do, like sewers and roads.
How long is Roseland not going to have a clubhouse for? That's the serious question. Like, are they going to have to expedite this?
John, who cares? Like, seriously, from a city standpoint, who cares? The city shouldn't be running a golf course. That's a whole other conversation. You could sell that place for probably $30 million and fix a lot of problems.
It was a layup for a joke, Don.
Sorry, I'm in my serious mode right now.
Not a pedestal to just crush me.
I'm here for that. Like, if we can, invest in actual public services, i.e. what the city administration and council are here to actually do and implement, why not? I will also say about transit is like, it's interesting what we're willing to let other organizations, third party, private organizations subsidize and what we aren't, right? Like, why is St. Clair College having to subsidize a public service? And I mean, in the argument here, and I appreciate what they did. I do appreciate, President France's leadership here. But there's a lot of essential workers and people, who aren't students who also use transit. And transit's been this problem for so long. Again, it's one of those things, like, we know it's a problem. We know what needs to be done to fix it. We're just choosing not to. And that turns people away. Anecdotally, I heard from friends who do take transit, and then their frustration with it, where they're like, some days if, something needs to be done quickly, they're like, they don't even bother with transit because it's not reliable. They're not going to get from point A to point B on time. And it's not the fault of Transit Windsor necessarily. It's, there's just not enough funding to make it a reliable service like it needs to be in a city that would be, one where young people, millennials, young families, others would want to stay and be able to raise a family. And then we would get, down the road, other type of investment as well. So it's like, we just like this little circle where we keep shooting ourselves in the foot and then wondering why we're bleeding. It's unfortunate.
Well, and, not to keep beating up on Roseland, but they're going to be the topic of the day. $4.3 million. We're currently in the middle of constructing low income or geared income housing out off Meadowbrook. And if you do the math on that project, it's expensive, but it's running about $330,000 a unit. What's more important, a golf course reno of a clubhouse, or adding 12 more units of low income or geared income housing? I'm willing to bet those 12 people who would get that housing, it's going to mean a lot more to them as opposed to the guys and ladies golfing down at the golf course who don't need any financial help, to have a nicer place to go sit afterwards and talk about how the game went. I'm joking about this quite a bit, but this is a serious problem, and we have serious issues in this city that, again, the priorities don't match up with what's really happening in the city, and that's why nothing changes. 12 people, 12 families could have housing, but instead we chose to go with a golf course. So the mayor, Councillor Francis, anyone who backed that really has to look themselves in the mirror and say, you made a choice that golf patrons are more important than people who need low income housing in this area. And even the 330 million or whatever the price tag is that we're throwing at that, you can hold that up and go, oh, great, look all the fantastic things we're doing. But we could have easily done a lot more if they just had some sense of what's really important.
The folks who live around Roseland vote for Mayor Dilkins at around a 65% clip, Don. So how can you say it's not a priority?
Well, I think that's something you might want to address, Doug. not disclosing where Doug lives, but yeah, I'm just...
on the affordable housing note, I think, if we're going to talk about the pandemic and that this budget was affected by the pandemic, let's talk about the fact that, Windsor has one of the highest child poverty rates in the country. It has a significant single mother rate as well. There's a lot of families living in poverty. The affordable housing rate waiting list, is really long. And at current rates, the Housing Corporation will never catch up to that. And so imagine what the pandemic did to that. that waiting list is probably longer now. And we're still investing at the same levels as before pandemic. So, like maybe before the pandemic, we had invested in and chosen to invest in the golf course. I'm trying to give benefit of the doubt here, or the $7 million celestial beacon project. But it's not written in stone, and there are ways to defer these things and reallocate those funds for things that are now a need to have for so many members of the community. And maybe we can revisit the beacon project or the golf course in like a couple decades.
Well, it was
further.
interesting, and I don't want to commandeer the show here, but I actually listened to the meeting, and I'm all for young kids getting involved and making their voices heard at these city council meetings and budget deliberations. But there was one young guy in there, and I don't know his name, and I'm going to apologize ahead of time because I'm probably going to pick on you a little bit. But his idea was that we should build a golf course down at the waterfront for golf deprived children who don't have the money and wherewithal to go play at Roseland. So, there was a solution right there for our golfers, and we could have helped the low income communities at the same time.
Mix in a canal and then you're cooking.
Well, then you can
gondola.
learn to sail. You can learn to sail. You can learn how to canoe. It's fantastic.
This comment alone could be a case study on like the disparity in the community of people's experiences. Like just the privilege in that comment was amazing.
Yeah.
Shout out to this kid. I'm sorry to whoever he was.
No,
I hope he stays involved.
I'm glad you're involved, but man, come on. You obviously do not have any problems in your life at this point.
Yeah, so, you 14-year-old. Screw you. This is a city politics show. Get your stuff together.
Right. You want to play in the big leagues? We're going to attack you, buddy.
Sorry, Doug.
It's okay. I the very serious business of mocking children. I should not have interrupted that.
I want to be clear. We're not making fun of the child. We are making
just his thoughts and opinions.
Commenting exactly.
A through line. There's a through line here. The convictions that we hold as a city do not match what we say our convictions are. There is endless talk in this community about the issues that we face. And not all of these issues are easy for a municipal government to solve alone. I recognize that and I respect that. That's a truth. We are not going to solve poverty in Windsor as a municipality alone. All kinds of things have to be done by other levels of government. But when we talk about transit, when we talk about public housing, when we talk about climate change, these are all things that the city has made statements, and politicians connected to the city have made statements about how important they are, how much they matter, how serious we are this time for real. We have master plans. We have all kinds of votes in principle. But when it comes time to actually open the vault and spend the money, our real priorities are investing in amenities in parts of the city that honestly do not need more investment in amenities. Our priorities are to shy away from any kind of risk associated with any of those investments. I think the mayor is deathly afraid of making an investment, for example, in a new Transit Windsor route and then seeing ridership not materialize. He is extremely worried about having to face any kind of embarrassment. You know what? We are going to make mistakes along the way to solving this community's problems. There are going to be missteps. There probably is going to be investments that we make that we wish we had made a different way after they're done. You cannot solve problems without being prepared to make mistakes. The only place we're prepared to make a mistake as a community is over-investing in areas of this community that already have gobs of resources and gobs of privilege. And that's a huge problem.
Well, I agree with that, but the problem is, I believe just by their actions at city and city council, they look at these problems as political problems. They don't look at them as actual on the ground, real problems. Everything is a political thing. So if they can control the messaging and throw some money at it and make it go away until someone cares again, they consider that a win. The result, they're not trying to solve their problem. They're trying to solve the political problem.
And that goes to, that $200,000 being kept in the mayor's office. It's all about optics. It's all about making sure that you get that nice local story that covers you in the right light. And as we joke about often in our chat that we have, it's really easy to get those kind of stories, which means that for the kind of things that we're seeing put out in the community, they're really low hanging fruits that, of course, aren't going to ever address the issue. And just to pick up on our last topic that we're going to get to tonight, in the same vein of our priorities and a budget, we
Can
have
I jump in really quick, John,
by,
before that?
by all means.
Just really quick, I think one other point about that 200,000, and it could be applied to anything, is that it's a lot of community advocacy groups who might be, made up of diverse members or marginalized members don't have a lot of funding and resources. So when you take like $200,000 is a lot of money. So to dangle crumbs like that in front of someone, a group, and say like, as long as you make sure you make me look good, it's not effective and it doesn't actually do the community a greater good, right? So I think that's also really unfortunate because the headlines might look good, like, we invested in anti-racism, but the actual implementation is awful and it's not helping us in the long run. So I think sometimes even people from, diverse backgrounds are scared to criticize things like that because we're so used to not having anything that even a little bit feels like enough. But if it's not done the right way, it's actually more harmful in the long run. And I think that can be applied to so many other things, which, like the next topic.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, really, like $200,000 is a huge amount of money. Doling it out in, $10, $15, $20,000 amounts to local community organizations that see that on a sometimes multi-year basis would make a huge impact. And you've got to presume that because of the politicized nature of it, I don't want to say it's guaranteed to come with strings attached, but of course, I mean, we saw the mayor really publicly reprimand Adriano Ciotoli from Windsor Eats at this city council meeting because Adriano had the gall to suggest that the city might want to reprioritize their spending decisions in terms of opening an ice skating rink and not keeping a food hall going. But let's just use this last 10 minutes that we have because I really do think that this is the same.
I have to make a comment.
I'm
here.
never going to get to this topic.
No, 13 seconds. The best part of that whole meeting when Adriano was there is the mayor actually gave him the opportunity to apologize for him for comments that showed up in the Windsor Star on that. And he did.
Well, Adriano's smart. He's not going to look a gift horse in the mouth. Like
I like Adriano, but come on, who says at a public meeting you now have the opportunity to basically apologize? Like, and go on. Sorry, John.
It doesn't reflect on Adriano.
That was an amazing moment at council. I saw that too, Don, and it was absolutely amazing. Honestly, I wouldn't be too surprised if the mayor asked a question of every delegate that ever comes before council in the future. Do you have anything to apologize to the city for? Because this is your forum.
Well, it reminded me of like a Donald Trump, like one of the cabinet meetings, like, Mayor Dilkens, thank you so much for this opportunity to be in this brand new city hall that because of your leadership and vision was able to be created. The sun is shining through the glass windows at the back and it's such a great grand vision. Thank you. I'm going to get yelled at for this. Let's just, though, we'll talk about this last topic, I swear. We're talking $4 million for Roseland, yet we have Mayor Dilkens here. This is a Canadian press story. I saw this on Global News, which is, one of those Windsor stories that it's not a positive story that we saw on our national news coverage. Mayor Dilkens threatening to close a foreign worker isolation center because of a funding shortfall in federal support. It has to do with a program being shifted from one department to another and a new application having to be submitted. And there was a few 12% fee paid to Red Cross that it looks like it's not going to be covered anymore. The point being is Mayor Dilkens here is threatening to shut down an isolation center that was used by somewhere between 500 and 800 temporary foreign workers to isolate from COVID-19, arguably something that impacts each one of us on a daily basis, trying to prevent this spread. It's become the biggest concern that we've all been facing now for going on to a full year. And here you have Mayor Dilkens. He was seeking to grandfather the current agreement into place. I think that he's grandstanding here and threatening to shut down a temporary foreign worker isolation hotel at a tune of $2 million when we're spending $4 million towards a golf course and all the other funding priorities that we have. I mean, that is a slap in the face. And I get that this is jockeying to try to get that funding from another level of government. But what does that say about our priorities? That the day after our budget was passed, this is not a new story. It just came out now that Mayor Dilkens was willing to, shut down this hotel on face value for temporary foreign workers rather than trying to find a way to fund it. Like, how do we square that, Doug?
Well, it's interesting. Mayor Dilkens only seems to have one way of relating to higher levels of government that aren't run by Doug Ford. And that is to be confrontational and to be denigrating either to local representatives or to the government or to bureaucrats. It is an interesting contrast because by comparison, anytime Doug Ford burps, Mayor Dilkens is there applauding how amazing that the smell and sound was. But in this case, I think that this brinkmanship is unreasonable. I agree with you. I don't think that this is a good way to conduct negotiations in public. On the other hand, this is a county issue. I recognize your point, John, that the temporary foreign workers with COVID are a risk to the entire community, and they represent a risk to everyone, and it represents a challenge that we have to deal with. Like, we have to come together as a community, just as we do when there is a need to isolate members of the homeless community. We have to come together not only out of compassion and humanity, but also in terms of public health. At the same time, these farms are in the county. County municipalities were not able to step up to the plate because they do not have the capacity in their communities. They don't have the hotel space to deliver this kind of isolation center. Don't you think it's time for county municipalities to step up, especially if there's a funding shortfall? I'm not sure why we're pointing the finger at Ottawa when our neighbors in Leamington, Kingsville, Essex, whose economy runs on the temporary foreign worker program, aren't being asked to step up to the plate and support this program as well.
Wow, Doug, it's almost like it's an incredibly nuanced situation that shouldn't be boiled down to just simply saying, I'm taking my ball and running away from the situation, and screw you guys, I'm going home. I mean, it blows me away that would have been the focus that we saw, when of course you're absolutely right. And like, that was going to be the point that I was trying to get to when we asked the questions around. And I'm glad that you brought it up. It gets to this level of, how do we do politics? What do we actually view as our priorities?
Yeah, I can. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sarah.
Go ahead.
No, you're smarter than me. Go ahead.
I don't know about that. Depends on the day.
No,
I think...
you're a lot smarter than
Shut
Doug.
up, John. Just let her talk.
Trying to say something serious and now I'm laughing. I think it says a lot about us as a community on how we treat some of the most at-risk Black and Brown men who do the work that we don't want to do for pay that we wouldn't accept to keep food on our tables, how we treat them at one of the most difficult moments in their life, right? So it's easy to say kumbaya and we're all in this together in a public health crisis, but when push comes to shove, it just seems like it's a volleyball we're throwing around and trying to make someone else take responsibility for, instead of coming together in a more cohesive way and speaking with our municipal partners and saying, how can we work on this together to ensure that the temporary foreign workers are safe, and therefore our entire community stays safe. And that's that's leadership, right? And that's unfortunately not here at the table. We'd rather score political points with a certain segment of our community who doesn't like these people, rather than actually do the right thing when the time calls for it.
So I guess I'm gonna be the bad guy here. I agree with what Sarah said. The temporary foreign workers that come into this community, and this isn't new, they've been treated poorly for decades. They've always been treated horribly, and I don't want to use some flamboyant language to describe how they're treated. But, you know, in the business I'm in, I work all over the county. I work all over the city. I've sold some of the properties out there that are using to house these temporary foreign workers, and they're living in very not ideal situations. Given this situation, I think the mayor's style on how he's approaching this problem isn't working, but I do agree with the fact that I'm not going to say it's not our problem, but I think everybody is letting the companies that hire these workers off the hook, because for years and years and years, they should have been supplying basic good housing for these people, and they're not. They've been building temporary foreign worker housing, multi-story units out there for years, and something that should have taken a year has taken way too long, and the expense has gone crazy, and there's a whole bunch of shenanigans that I sound like Biden now. There's a whole bunch of shenanigans going on out there that everybody's making money off this, but no one's solving the problem. I think we should first look to the companies that are hiring these workers. And if they're not supplying housing that can keep them safe every day of the week and also during a pandemic, they're the ones who should be looking at themselves and funding things like this. It is a regional problem. Yes, it does affect Windsor because, people, if they're sick, they are coming into the community. But I agree with Doug. This is a county problem. And if the county doesn't want to step up and pay for this, because everybody out there in the county is getting the benefit of this super low cost labor coming in. And that's us too. I mean, we're all getting the benefit of all this with lower prices. But we're not willing to look after the basic needs of these people we're shipping in from other countries and making them live in what are very unideal situations. I don't think this is Windsor's problem, and I don't think we should be paying for it. I think we should be helping out where possible. But the first part it starts at is with the companies that are hiring them. The higher levels of government have made these arrangements with these corporations that they don't have to provide basic housing for them. And I'm sure it's because of a cost thing, but they've let these companies off the hook for years and years and years. And it's time they step up and start paying and supporting their workers that, are making them millions and millions of dollars. Don't kid yourself. Those greenhouse guys are making tons of money out there, and they could easily fund this situation if they all got together and said, look, we got to kick in $2 million, whatever the number is. That is an easy thing for them to do, and it wouldn't hurt their bottom line that much. And they should have been doing it all along.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with that, because I think at the end of the day, what the pandemic did and what I think this entire discussion is highlighting is it wasn't the pandemic's problem. The pandemic has highlighted problems that were always here and just put them into sharp focus. And so it's very hard to throw around blame instead of saying, like, look, let's work together and see, where did we not properly address things, and let's fix it for the future. It seems so like mature and idealistic, I guess, but I hope that we can get to that point at sometime soon, because if anything, this past year has taught us, when we don't do that, people get sick and they die, and that should not be okay.
Well, we're going to leave it on that point there. Try to leave it on, I guess, that it started out as a optimistic point, but then it really crashed and got pretty negative there at the end, Sarah, I got to admit. But we'll leave that there. And I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight, Sarah. I'm incredibly excited to read your column when it comes out in the Windsor Star in the coming days. Again, Sarah Mushtaq, a Windsor community member who writes for the Windsor Star as a guest columnist. She writes as a millennial about race, gender, and life in today's changing world and the city of Windsor. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, always a pleasure to chat with you guys, even if it's about golf.
Much appreciated to have you here. If you're listening tonight and you are a Patreon subscriber, thank you so much. If you're not, head over to patreon.com/Rose City Politics. Check us out in BizX Magazine as well, or at bizxmagazine.com. We have a monthly column. And of course, we publish to Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and all of your favorite podcasting apps. And this podcast, Rose City Politics, would not be possible without our great friends over at Liuna 625, Building Better Communities. Any last thoughts, Doug or Don, before I say that this is a wrap? I'm seeing none from either of you. So that's a wrap, folks. We'll see you all next week.